Good afternoon. My name is Carol Donahoe, and I'm the Program Director at the Omega Institute. I want to welcome our friends on Zoom and Facebook Live. During this time of a global crisis, when we are unable to welcome you to our Rhinebeck campus, we want to stay connected, offer support, and continue to awaken the best in human spirit. To that end, we have created this online series that we are calling Omega Conversations. Today, our guest is Tara Brach. Tara is an internationally known meditation teacher. Her teachings combine Western psychology and Eastern spiritual practices. She has a beautiful blend of attending to our inner life while also teaching how to compassionately engage with the world. She is the founder of the Insight Meditation Community of Washington, D.C. She's a best-selling author of the books Radical Acceptance, True Refuge, and her newest book, Radical Compassion. She's been a friend of Omega for over 20 years, and I appreciate her teaching personally because I have found her to be one of the most authentic people that I've worked with. So it gives me great pleasure to turn this conversation over to Tara Brach.
Oh, thank you, Carol, and really appreciate Omega hosting this. Really, really beautiful. And I want to thanks to each of you for tuning in, those that are tuning in on Zoom, those on Facebook Live. And I also want to share that I'm here in Virginia right now, and I'm actually pre-recording this. We have winds of over 40 miles an hour, and our power goes. So we didn't want to take a chance. So you've got me a few hours ahead of time. I just want you to know I've been with you in these last hours, and these gatherings feel so important to be getting together in this way. It feels like so much part of the healing of what needs to happen at times of real global suffering. A few weeks ago, a friend emailed me a cartoon. It was a picture of Sisyphus, and he was working at home on a laptop with a huge boulder by his side. And he looked kind of confused. And it's so clear that this crisis is toppling every routine on every level. I mean, with our world falling apart, and whether you're feeling personally threatened right now or worried for others, it does bring up a kind of existential fear and dread and uncertainty. And I also want to name, just so we can hold it in our hearts together, that it's increasingly clear that this pandemic is most devastating to those who are economically disadvantaged. They're the ones that are most likely to contract the virus, to die of it. And this great horror in the United States right now of how many African Americans are really going to be dying. It's from all the generations of structural inequality, they're the ones that don't have the luxury to work at home, as do others that are economically disadvantaged and the least access to care. So even with this inequity, I'm aware that this suffering is so widespread that all of our nervous systems are feeling it. We're just part of this living web. And for a huge number, it means really deep loss and hardship and heartbreak. And I thought maybe I'd speak personally. Just feels so important that we're real with each other. That I'm continuing to teach as I am right here with you and out there. And every day I've felt waves of fear. I felt some agitation. My daughter-in-law is pregnant, and she's been working at the largest hospital in San Francisco. So very high risk, worrying for her family and worrying for so many that I know on the front lines, so many I know who have lost parents to this already. I know people in quarantine, people that have no idea how they'll ever get back financially. So I just wanted to name that I'm in process, that there's a mix of fear, of sorrow. But there's also something else that I'm feeling every day. And it's this amazing possibility right now for collective awakening, that there'd be more caring. There'd be more caring in our world. As we know, and I like to take this evolutionary perspective through the history of our species, huge disruptions can be times of amazing adaptation, tapping deepest resources, our intelligence, our creativity, our love. And I suspect as you're listening, you know this from your own life, that when things fall apart, loss of someone that you love, a relational breakup, real challenge for somebody dear, it calls out our strength. And so, both as individuals, as species, we have this potential to be resilient and grow in crisis. And historically, and this is always fascinating to me, um, during crisis, and this is especially seen in the last 10 to 20,000 years, what has come out of humans is more capacity to collaborate and feel compassion past our kin groups. And that's what's so important, that our hearts are holding more and more beings, and we're able to take care of more and more beings. A story I heard a while back about Catholic worker Dorothy Day. She's a social activist. When she was 8 years old, she was living in San Francisco. It was during the earthquake of 1906. And she watched people emerge from that, taking care of each other, strangers taking care of strangers in a way she had never seen. And she realized they had known how to do this all along. It came spontaneously. And she asked this question: why can't we be this way all the time? Why can't we be this way all the time? It became the guiding question of her life. And it feels so important, something we can reflect on together, that we can see during, let's say, this last month or so, um, the ways that humans have regressed. We can see the way we get caught in our primitive survival reactions. And for so many, that anxiety and trauma and confusion has been really great. There's been increase in alcohol abuse and drug use is up. We can watch it with, there's statistics on domestic abuse. So there's ways that with the fear spike, we've gotten caught in a much more primitive mind. And oh my gosh, the millions and millions of people who with such generosity offered themselves into where the need is. It's been so beautiful. It's what I call radical compassion, which is really the compassion that's so inclusive, so inclusive. So when I talk about awareness of possibility, it's really possibility for a more loving world. So we watch it, and we watch how fear is contagious, and we watch how the caring is contagious. Many of you are familiar, I know, with a wonderful teaching from Thich Nhat Hanh that I thought I'd bring into our shared atmosphere because it's so helpful to remember. He writes that when the crowded Vietnamese refugee boats met with storms or pirates, if everyone panicked, all would be lost. But if even one person on that boat remained calm and centered, open hearted, then it was enough. It showed the way for everyone to survive. And so the inquiry really is, how can we be that person in the midst of all the intensity? For our own hearts to have that inner refuge, for our family, our friends. And we know adversity can wake us up to that, especially if we're intentional. There's part of the Bodhisattva aspiration, a prayer that I've been turning towards for years and years now. And it goes like this. It says, may whatever circumstances arise, whatever circumstances, may they serve to awaken my heart, awaken compassion. And it can be any circumstances, including what's happening right now. May this serve to wake us up. Let me just take a moment to pause here and give you a chance to try it on, because it's such a beautiful reflection. You might close your eyes. And in this pause, take a few full breaths. Bring yourself right here, right now. Letting the breath resume in its natural rhythm. You might scan your life and sense whatever is feeling most difficult for you right now, whatever this crisis is bringing up for you personally. What are you most afraid about? What feels most distressing? And letting what's upsetting be right here. Just sense this aspiration. May these circumstances help awaken my heart, help awaken compassion, wisdom. And you might sense how that might be for you. What might be called forth in you that you value through these times. And feel free to open your eyes whenever you'd like. So let's look at a pathway of how, in the face of our fears, meditation practice can really help us to awaken that bodhisattva heart right in the midst of difficulty. And I'll be leading a more full practice. It'll be a weave of mindfulness and compassion based on the rain meditation. If you're familiar, great. The good news is you could be doing it for a lifetime. There's no limit to the depth of where mindfulness and compassion can take us. RAIN's an acronym. It stands for, the R is recognize, the A is allow, the I is investigate, and the N is nurture. And then what follows those letters is what I call after the rain, where you actually rest in and get to know the who you are beyond the separate, scared self. So we'll be practicing rain. Before we do, I wanted to again share a bit personally about how I've been working with rain. I've been doing some version, sometimes a light rain, pretty much every day. And I mentioned my own vulnerability, like what I've been going through. And right at the beginning of March, it was right at the very beginning of the month, I was meditating one of my meditation spots on a rock by the Potomac River right here in Virginia. And the full magnitude, really, of this pandemic hit me. I started thinking of my family and all those that I feel are really vulnerable. And then I started widening to others that I know and started thinking of those that are locked up in prison or locked up in a refugee camp that will be just absolutely devastated. And so the fear and the agitation really built in my body. So I said, okay, let's practice with this. And the R of rain was to recognize, just to recognize, okay, agitated, fearful. And with the R of rain, I sometimes mentally whisper it just to really make it clear, okay, something's happening here. The A of rain, allow. Allow means just to let it be without judging it or trying to fix it or pushing it away. It's a pausing with. And I find it helpful to sometimes say, okay, this belongs. It's as if like a wave in the ocean, this wave of fear belongs. Let it be. And then the I of rain is investigate. And that's investigates primarily somatic. It's a misunderstanding with this practice that we're investigating cognitively. It's really embodied where all the healing can happen. So for me, investigating meant really feeling the clutch of fear in my heart and breathing with it. I often, when I'm investigating, put my hand on my heart to keep my attention there so I can really touch into it because we're so conditioned to try to leave where the vulnerability is. So breathing with it, feeling it, trying to have that courage to go right to the epicenter of where that vulnerability lives. Feeling the cells and the spaces between the cells that are most caught. And then the nurture is really inviting and offering into the scared place all the love in the world. And that's where I was just imagining and sensing this whole universe pervaded with, in some very basic way, a tenderness and love, and having it wash through right into that fear, really bathing the fear with tenderness, with compassion. And so the more that I sensed love washing into that fear place, the more there was a sense of dissolving into a much more enlarged place of presence. And what became clear was like I was resting in this compassionate presence that was holding the currents of fear. And they weren't my fear, it was the world's fear. It wasn't my personal fear anymore. The more I was in that compassionate presence, the more it was so clear that this is the world's fear that lives through every nervous system, every body. It's happening through all of us. And I'm finding I've had this realization over and over again with mindfulness and compassion, once I enlarge my sense of presence, that fear is nature's protector. It belongs and it lives through all of us. And what we are is the awareness, the tender, caring space that's happening in. And in the moments we realize that, then we can respond to our life and not react out of fear. It's like instead of being inside the wave and reacting, we're the ocean and we can call on all of our intelligence and our care in responding to the world. So before we practice, a few comments on rain. It's not a one shot. As I mentioned, fear keeps arising. So for me, I just keep coming back. Okay, here it is. Be with it, feel it, try to offer kindness. And then after the rain are the moments of sensing, okay, this wave, this current of fear is the world's fear, and sensing this compassionate presence that's more the truth of who we are than any story that we could ever tell about ourselves. So it's not a one shot. And especially in times of crisis, we need tools that we can easily remember and that we can bring to ourselves over and over again to keep waking up out of the trance of reactivity and fear. So the good news is that the more you do it, the more you practice with mindfulness and compassion, with rain, actually the more natural and spontaneously it emerges. I'll tell you about one friend who has been practicing a lot with it recently, kind of a light rain. And she describes how she'll name the fear, she'll allow it, she'll feel it in her body. And then she sends this nurturing message. Thank you for trying to protect me. I'm okay right now. Thank you for trying to protect me. I'm okay right now. And with that, there's this shift. It's like she's no longer the fearful self. She's that kind presence and the fear has some space to come and go. So I share with you this just because there's a lot of different ways you can practice and learn to be with the fear and to open to it and nurture. But the bottom line is our conditions to move away from vulnerability, and our freedom is in opening to it and discovering where the openness and love that has room for what's here. So, with that, I'd like to invite you to practice. And if you find that rain resonates for you, there's a lot of guidance talks and meditations on my website that are all of it's free. Also, my book Radical Compassion really is a guidebook on how to use rain. Okay, so please make yourself comfortable. And when you come into stillness, see what might want to let go right. In the quietness, you might bring to mind something about what you're currently experiencing that brings up fear or agitation. And I invite you to bring up something that's not traumatizing. You might know the words window of tolerance, something that is tolerable, but still feels really frightening to you in some way, really distressing. So take a moment to reflect and sense whatever to do with this current crisis might be really triggering you, something to do with your own health, your own safety, your own finances, or maybe the well being of others, or maybe many others. And once you have something in mind, actually imagine the situation that most brings it up for you. And it may be something that's happening currently or that you're imagining is around the corner. But let yourself have some visual image of situation. If it involves another person, to see them and sense into what the worst part of this is for you. What are you most afraid of? We begin rain by simply recognizing what's most predominant right now, what you're most aware of. And it may be fear or worry, anxiety, anger, agitation. It might be a few things, and you can just sense what most wants my attention right now. And with whatever arises, just to name it mentally with a kind of inner whisper, allowing means simply the willingness to let it be here right now. In some way, we're sending a message inwardly to let be, to pause and accept that right now, this is what's happening. This is the wave in the ocean that's intense. You might, in some way, send the message, this belongs. For some people, it's helpful to whisper yes, an acknowledgement of, okay, this is the reality in this moment, or let be. And then we can begin to investigate with curiosity, with gentleness, what's here. And I invite you to sense into your body and where do you feel it most distinctly? And check your throat, your chest, your belly. And to help yourself, you might gently place your hand wherever you feel vulnerability the most. What's it like? Are you aware of heat or tightness, pressure, aches, squeezing, twisting? Keeping your hand there, you might sense, well, what am I believing when I'm feeling this? What bad thing am I believing is going to happen? And whatever your mind comes up with, come back into your body even more and sense, so what's it really feel like right here? Is there a clutching feeling? If it's really strong, breathe with it. And again, let your hand both keep your attention there, but also let your hand begin the nurturing, just to sense, okay, I'm here. I'm feeling it, but I'm also here with you. Can you feel right into the intensity, to the epicenter? And you might ask this question: what do you most need? Or how do you want me to be with you right now? Just sense what this fearful part of you most wants. Is it understanding, company, that you accept it's there, forgiveness, love? In some way, the want is always some flavor of loving, of knowing a larger belonging. And that's where nurturing comes in. And we move to this final part of nurturing. Sense that you can be attending from your most awake and wise heart, your most tender heart. And as you sense what's needed, sense how you want to respond to your own fear. Perhaps there's a message you want to offer. I'm here. I'm not leaving. Or thank you for trying to protect me. I'm okay right now, this moment. Or maybe you're held in love. You belong to love. You might vary your touch as you offer a message, so you really are conveying it with your hand. It's that love and care is going right through your hand to wherever you're feeling vulnerability. Experiment. Experiment with letting in love. For some, you might find it's hard to offer yourself loving, and it's just as good to sense the love and wisdom that flows from some larger source, like a friend or a grandparent or a teacher or a healer, or maybe a spiritual figure. Maybe it's formless presence, as I described, that sense of the whole universe, the tenderness of the whole universe that's bathing the vulnerability. You might explore letting go and opening a little bit more, feeling the longing to let the love in and a willingness to receive. Letting the love that's in this universe wash through you, through your entire being. The last part of this is called After the Rain. Sense the possibility now of relaxing back and simply being that loving awareness. You're the ocean with the waves on the surface. You're that tender, wakeful openness that cares about this changing life. Notice the shift from being a fearful self to being this openness, this awareness, this love that includes the currents, that includes the world sphere. The poet Dana Falls writes, "We are the love we long for." This outpouring of the heart, bigger than our deepest fear. It's love that makes us whole. Okay, my friends, please open your eyes. And if you'd like, just move around a little bit. Feel yourself right here. You know, if we have the courage and the presence to meet our own vulnerability, we can be with others in a much more attuned way. It's like if we can love ourselves into healing, we have that loving awareness available that really holds others. So, as I say that, I want to acknowledge that pandemic can be a setup for disconnection. We know that physical distancing, competition for all the scarce resources, there's an atmosphere of fear, and especially for those living alone, it can be a real setup for trauma, for loneliness. So it's essential, in addition to practicing intimacy with our inner life, to be really intentional about connecting with others and how we connect with others. And by the way, I feel like it really is happening. We are honoring social distancing of our bodies, but not our hearts. And I'm watching it. There are gatherings like this that can make such a difference to feel our togetherness. And people are coming together doing yoga and having dinner gatherings and dance parties. And my assistant Janet has Parkinson's, and she's been doing a weekly boxing online class. So we need to be together. We need to move and be alive and enjoy. And we need to be together and be real and vulnerable and communicate what's happening for us. It's our attuning together that most can help us feel safe. Um, One of our online groups in the DC meditation community that was meeting in small groups and on Zoom, one of the friends in the group joined in from the hospital. She had been isolated in a coronavirus unit, and she was describing how the only people she saw were coming in with their big hazmat, suits and coverings and so on, and what it felt like to be in that Zoom room with some friends and be able to just name the pain of that isolation and to feel seen and heard. Um, so many have told me about reaching out to dear ones and helping them and being helped, and that's what we need. And here's the challenge that we all know. It's so easy to go into trance and feel like a separate self and the world's out there and forget what others are going through. One of my favorite all-time quotes, I think it's anonymous, is "Be kind. Everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle." What if we could actually move through and remember that with every email we send and every Zoom meeting and every encounter, that everyone's living with vulnerability, and especially now. And in some way, deep down, be asking, we can either do it out loud or with our kind of attuning, what's it like for you? What's it like for you? I've been talking about the bodhisattva aspiration. In Buddhism, on the Bodhisattva path, which is the path of awakening our hearts, which every single one of you is part of, we all are, there's an actual training to look to see the shared vulnerability, because it's only when we can recognize the truth of vulnerability that we actually become tender and awaken compassion. Vulnerability is our portal to compassion, and it's universal. We're all vulnerable. But can we have the courage to close in and feel it in ourselves and each other so we can feel our shared belonging? I think of a friend of mine, Valerie Carr. Some of you may have heard of her. She's wonderful. She says, this is truly a time to know that no one is a stranger. What if we could move through like that? I wanted to share with you, this is just something I read about a couple of days ago, South Africa and Cape Town. Rival gangs that have been at it for decades, a lot of violence, really, creating havoc in the city. Well, the leaders from two of the different gangs called a pastor who works with gangs and said, we need food. And so he got them and other gang leaders together, and they agreed on a truce. And they're right now organized to distribute food together to their communities. And it was just beautiful to watch kind of the interviewing of them, because none of them could have imagined this ever happening. And you could kind of feel the joyfulness and camaraderie of being helpers and doing it together. And we can hear that, and there may be that cynicism that says, yeah, and when conditions go back to some version of normal, then they'll return to the violence. And maybe they will. Maybe that'll happen. But there's something also in that story that you can kind of feel the freshness and the openness that occurred for them of stepping out of the separateness and really feeling an aliveness with that. And I know for me, and maybe you feel the same as you listen, just the poignancy of this tragedy of young men who could be brothers getting habituated to the violence and the longing for reconciliation. How much we love. And it's possible. And the more we train ourselves, the more it'll ripple out. Train ourselves to see that no one's a stranger. I mentioned Dorothy Day, why can't we live this way all the time? We need to bring it into our daily life, wherever we're sheltering, whoever we're in touch with, in some way saying, where does it hurt? What's it like being you? So our habit is to sense that not just the shared vulnerability, but when we do, the goodness, the spirit that's under it. So it takes a training. And when we bring rain inwardly, we get more sensitive. I'll share a brief story that affected me a lot. A few years ago, I was working with one man, very driven guy, really bad temper, especially he was very little patience and tolerance in his company for any of the teams that he worked with that were underperforming, weren't doing their job. But it was when his anger ended up creating so much conflict in his marriage and family that he said, okay, I'm going to start practicing mindfulness. So I taught him rain, because it's when we're most in a trance, it's easier to remember than a lot of other practices. And it gave him a way, when he started feeling that surge of anger, to pause. And sometimes it actually interrupted the lashing out, and sometimes it didn't. But he had a little more space to make a choice. Well, he told me about one experience where that space had radically impacted what happened. And he described meeting with a project manager who admitted that his team was behind schedule on some major projects, and that, he had personally let some things fall through the cracks. So this guy that I'm talking about felt this rising irritation. And he paused, recognize, allow, feel it in the body. Okay, breathe with it. You know, it's okay, giving himself a message. So he had more space. He didn't blow up. And he started listening to the guys he was talking, and he just started taking them in. This long-term employee who was so dedicated. He was an honest guy, a thoughtful guy, and he seemed oppressed in some way. Something was bothering him. So he didn't. Not only did he not pounce, he expressed his appreciation. He said, I know you're probably doing the very best you can. Well, this totally caught the manager off guard, and because he had expected this man to do what he normally did, and he responded. He said, "Well, I didn't plan to say this, but my wife has stage 4 breast cancer, and I have 2 teens, and it's a really tough time." So they ended up hugging. This is the first time at work this had happened to this man, with tears. And he told me that months earlier, this would have happened and he would have unwittingly added to this man's burdens by getting angry. But being able to interrupt with his own inner process opened up the possibility of real human contact. So I wanted to share this with you because it feels timely right now that if we know how to bring mindfulness and compassion to our own fear, it shifts our sense of who we are. We become bigger. We don't react in the same ways, whether it's anger or blaming or some addictive consuming or turning on ourselves. There's more space to wake up our hearts and respond from a more loving place. So, in that spirit, we'll do a final short compassion practice. I invite you to, wherever you're sitting, adjust your posture so you can be relaxed and awake. You might close your eyes and take a few full breaths. And then take a moment to feel your aspiration. Whatever this moment is the language for what your heart's longing for. What do you want called forth in you? Then scanning inside, sensing in this moment if anything needs a healing attention. In a very simple way, noticing what's happening inside you and offering some gesture of kindness. Perhaps a light touch, the hand at the heart, a kind whisper, it's okay. Just noticing how even a bit of kindness directed inwardly can soften and open us. And bringing to mind a dear one who can use your healing attention. And sensing them close in, sensing you can see their face, their eyes, and letting that question, what's it like being you, be there. It might not be that you're asking them, but you're inviting really your own attentions to deepen and wondering, what is it like being you? Or as one wise woman put it, where does it hurt? Letting your heart space include their fears, their worries, and offering some mental whisper of care. You might use their name. bringing to mind a person who's really different from you, someone you know, but that's different either in terms of race or socioeconomic class, religion, type of work, political beliefs. Not letting this person be a stranger, sensing their vulnerability, and offering some prayer or wish of care for them. And then holding yourself and that dear one that you were reflecting on, and then the more person who's more of difference, holding all, sensing all those in the field right now, sensing all of us everywhere, all beings on this earth. All are being held in this heart space. So you can feel with a tenderness, it's the world sphere being held in a spacious and open heart. L.R. Nost writes, "Do not be dismayed by the brokenness of the world. All things break, and all things can be mended. Not with time, as they say, but with intention. So go, love intentionally, extravagantly, unconditionally. The broken world waits in darkness for the light that is you." And so, my friends, we close together with a shared prayer, feeling our shared heart space, and you might feel yourself joined in this field by fellow beings who deeply care about bringing more love into the world. I mean, we might feel our shared aspiration right now that all beings everywhere might realize their very essence as loving awareness, that all beings might live from loving awareness, that all beings might touch natural and great peace. May there be healing. May there be healing. May all beings everywhere awaken and be free. Namaste, and please take good care. Be safe, be well. Thank you.